Hi, I'm Jeff Stark. We've been looking at this matter of pornography as it relates to husbands and wives in pornography videos number 1 and 2. Number 3, we turned our attention from pornography discovered in a marital situation to pornography as it relates to single men. And video number 3 was my trying to give single men the benefit of my 40-year experience of helping hundreds and hundreds of couples work through this problem with pornography. And what I tried to say in video number 3 was that, man, if you're bringing this problem into your marriage, or if you start it while you're married, you're going to be bringing great harm to your wife and destruction to your marriage. It's a very, very powerful thing. A wife whose husband is doing pornography is very sad, very angry, very upset, very disturbed, very despaired, depressed, grieving, maybe ashamed, embarrassed. Her self-esteem has been shot, and you can review video number 3 if you want more about that. But video number 3 was saying, men, I've got the experience. I've heard from these women. Every wife that I've ever had a chance to counsel who has discovered her husband doing pornography has gone through great, great, great despair, and it's greatly damaging to the marriage. You want to know more about that particular experience that the wife goes through, and subsequently then to the husband, go back to video number 3. But today's video number 4, we want to continue to talk to single men, and there's a couple things that I think are very, very important that single men need to understand about this matter of pornography. Here it is. Let's get started. If you are currently doing pornography, if you're doing it once, twice, 3 times a week, if you've been doing pornography regularly for some time, or if you've been doing it so long, perhaps many years and decades, that you might even consider yourself addicted. If you're someone who's doing it sometimes, regularly, or perhaps even addicted, if you fall into that category, or even infrequently, if you fall into that category, I have something to tell you that I think you need to know, and you may have never heard it before, but please pay attention to what I'm going to be saying to you right now. If that describes you and your pornographic habit, that habit disqualifies you from being married. It takes you off the table of potential partners of who might be ready and able to be married someday in the near future. If you have this problem with pornography, you're not on that table that makes you eligible and ready to get married. And not being on that table means I really can't take my dating relationships with women seriously because I'm disqualified. Why? Well, because I'm doing something that is the complete opposite of what marriage is all about. When we get married, a husband is making, and a wife, a husband is making a commitment, a promise, and a vow, a sacred promise, commitment, and vow, to be exclusively faithful and pure with his eyes toward his wife, with his thoughts regarding his wife, and with his lips and genitalia, and with his hands. He's committing himself to be safe, sexually pure, and faithful with that one particular woman who's going to be his wife. There's an exclusivity to that. He's making a promise not to bring any other women into that marriage, and he's promising to be sexually faithful to her and not having sexual experiences outside of his relationship to her. That's what marriage is. It's an exclusivity to be faithful and pure, self-controlled, sober, and exclusively in that way to his wife, and similarly a wife to her husband. Now, if you're a single guy who's looking at all these hundreds of videos and pictures of naked women, perhaps, or women in lingerie or whatever, all these pornographic images and videos, if you're looking at that and you're adding a sexual component to that, that is to say masturbating, and you're fantasizing in your mind, and you're looking with your eyes, and you're using your hands, and you're having a sexual experience, well, then that disqualifies you from marriage. How could you possibly become exclusively faithful to a wife when you've, for months and years, been looking at all these other women and having a sexual experience with that? No. No way. As a single man who knows that if he's going to be married and making those kinds of vows, he's got to learn and be trained while he's a single guy to be exclusively ready for one person with his eyes, with his hands, with his thoughts, and with his genitalia, getting him ready for the day when he might be married, because once he's going to get married and makes those promises, he's going to have to practice that faithfulness and sexual purity and the exclusivity of those things with her once he gets married to her. So if you're a single guy these days, and for many months and perhaps years, you ought to be training yourself to be ready to get married if indeed that opportunity arises. And you don't start this exclusivity and faithfulness in these matters after you find a girlfriend. Not at all. So, ladies and men, if you find, and ladies, if you find a guy who's coming close to you and he likes you and you like him and you're talking about possibly dating one another, you haven't quite decided on that, but you've been doing this thing for a couple of months and you're talking about it. Ladies, that's the time when you need to step up to the plate and have a very hard conversation. And that conversation at this point in time with this single guy would be, well, before we decide to date one another and get too close, and before I possibly fall in love with you, I need to ask you a very serious question. Well, he says, well, what's that? Do you do pornography and masturbation? Now, if the man says yes, that should be the end of that potential dating relationship on behalf of that woman. Because this man's looking at all these women, why would she expect that he's going to only be looking at her once they get married? What she would hope to hear and expect to hear from a single guy who's asked that question, he would hopefully be able to look at her in the eye and say, I do not do pornography. I do not masturbate. I know when I get married, I'm going to have to be practicing that once I get married. I know I'm not to start practicing that once I get married, and that I'm to be practicing and training myself with God's help and with the gospel in my life to be sexually pure and ready for the day when I'm going to be exclusive in that matter. Therefore, 2.5 years ago, having watched the video by this guy named Jeff something or other, he told me I was disqualified, and I believed it. So for 2.5 years, I have worked very, very hard to be ready to make those vows and to be exclusively sexual to my wife. And so, no, to answer your question, Rebecca, no, I do not do pornography and I do not do masturbation. God has helped me to acquire that level of maturity, and I have every intention of continuing to do it with God's help. And if I get married, I'm just going to continue to do what I've spent the last 2 years trying to do in my single life. That's the way it really ought to go. That's what men ought to be training themselves about right now, so that when that question comes up, they're able to answer their girlfriend in the right way. If the gal hears that, well, then they might decide to date each other. If she doesn't hear that, ladies, word of caution, if the guy really likes you, but he's been doing pornography, he's probably going to say something like, well, I do, but I really like you, and I'm not going to do it anymore. That's 2 years too late. 1 year too late, 2 years too late, and you would have to say, we cannot get serious, and we can remain friends, but there's no way I'm going to date somebody who hasn't learned to do this, who has been sexually unfaithful, visually unfaithful, mentally unfaithful. No, I'm sorry, and perhaps has an addiction. No, that's just out of the question. I want to marry a man who's ready to get married and has demonstrated it and proved it in his singlehood. So that if he can prove it in his singlehood, then he's qualified and trained to practice those things that he's going to have to do once he gets married. And I've been practicing the same things and training myself as well. And I used to have a marijuana problem, but I realized that disqualified me. I was addicted to marijuana, and I realized, Ben, that this problem disqualified me. Who would marry someone who's addicted? And I was addicted to marijuana. So for 2 years, I've been working on that, and I've been sober with God's help, and I intend to, because I cannot get married if I have an addiction to marijuana. And I'm happy where I am, and once I get married, I have to continue that sobriety regarding my marijuana because I want to be happily married, and I can't if I'm developing an addiction to pot, cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, gambling, or even pornography. Pornography is not an exclusively male problem, though it's predominantly a male problem, but it can be a woman's problem too. But that's the conversation that has to take place at some point and early on, and not after you fall in love with each other. Because if you fall in love with each other and you find out this guy is willing to do it, what you're probably going to say is, look, you got to stop right now. I love you and I want to be married to you, but we can't do this. And if the guy loves you, he'll probably say, I'll stop. So he stops for a month. He stops for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, because he wants to marry you. You've drawn the line in the sand. He can't cross over that line of marrying you until you stop. So he's really incentivized, motivated to stop doing pornography. So, he does. He stops for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. Month number 9, you get married. Now, why in month 12 would he dabble in pornography, which oftentimes happens? Well, the reason is because he stopped doing pornography because he's really, really highly motivated to get married to you. But hey, we're married now, and so that motivation to get married is no longer there, and the energy behind it is no longer there because he's acquired his goal. He's got other goals now that he's going after, and oftentimes we fall back into bad habits once we acquire our goals. This happens with women too. Women know that they've got to look really attractive to guys if they're the guy's going to propose and get married to her, and so it's not unusual for a wife to make certain changes like losing weight, going to the gym, getting haircuts and trimming down and losing 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds, something like that. Well, he's happy about that and she's happy about that, and that takes a series of months. They get married, and well, after month 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in marriage, perhaps she starts gaining that weight back. Well, what happened? Well, she was highly motivated to look nice and to please this boyfriend of hers, this fiancé. But now that she's acquired her goal of being married and getting a band on her finger and being, living together with a man, and well, now the motivation, the incentive to keep that weight off does not as rise to the occasion as it was wanting to get married and the necessity of doing that to be married. It's not uncommon for us to fall back into some old habits once we end up getting married. So, ladies, watch out for a guy who says, well, I do it, but I'm committed not to. That's 2 years, 1 year, 2 years too late. And you need to say to him, we just simply can't date. We can be friends, but, in a year or two, if you're still around and I'm still around, maybe we have this conversation again and maybe we'll consider, but at that point, but not right now. I'm sorry. So, I hope that's helpful for you as you think about these matters, guys. It really disqualifies you. No one would marry you in their right mind. Marry you if your practice is to look at all these naked women and have a sexual experience with that. Well, then you're not ready to be exclusive. You've not proven that you're ready to be married because you haven't learned how to be ready to be exclusive in your single life. So men, take this very, very seriously. Begin to get the help that you need in order to be able to say, some woman at some point in time, I have not done this for a year or 2 or 3. And God has helped me not to do that. And because he's getting me ready for in the occasion that I get married, then I know I need to practice these things after I get married as well. So you want to be ready to tell this young lady when she asks you this question, yes, I have been faithful. Now, this is not a question that comes up after you start dating. This is certainly not a question, ladies, that you propose once you're engaged. This is something that has to happen before you fall in love and before you start to seriously date somebody. I hope that's helpful to you guys. I assume you're watching this because this continues to be a struggle for you, and you need to look at it in these ways. And ladies, I hope this helps you as you think about finding a guy to get married. And you're living in a culture where men many men, most men are doing pornography, and this is going to be challenging for you and them as you navigate these waters with wisdom. I hope that's helpful to you. We're going to continue to talk to single men about this matter of pornography in video number 5. This is number 4. Hope to see you then.